What's up, guys? Charles here with Woodchuck Custom. I just wrapped up this DIY sauna here in my backyard, and over the course of this video, I'm going to be going over everything I did from start to finish so that you can build your own. Make sure to stick around because toward the end of the video, I'm going to be going over a full cost breakdown, what I would have done differently, and some things that I did do differently outside of conventional building methods that I think work better for this application. Okay, so I'm building the beginning base of my sauna right here. This is going to be essentially the outline that the walls sit on. I got 2 boards thick this way and 3 boards this way because my floor joists are going to go in here, and then I'm stacking my cedar planks just directly on top of that with no subfloor. So I want to have a 3rd piece here to catch that entail of my floorboards. Okay, so I've got the base over here pretty close to where it's going to be going. I've got it flipped upside down, and you'll see these 4x4s here that I've got on the bottom of this thing. I'm about to screw to it. These are just some skids so that if and when I move from this house, I will be able to take this with me. One thing that you'll see that I did here is I cut about 1 inch off these 4x4s. I ripped them for 2 reasons. One, I'm pressed for height, and I really don't need the full 3.5 inches to get a forklift under there. And 2, I got these 3.5 inch deck screws, so now I can attach these to the bottom. So if for whatever reason I ever need to take these off or change them out, all I need to do is tilt up my sauna on one side and unscrew them. Okay, now we've got the skids on. We got the base flipped over. I'm putting in my floor joist now using these nifty little hangers. And I know that some people are going to get mad or complain because I'm using 2x4s for floor joists. I don't care. Again, the reason is I'm trying to stay under a certain height, and this is helping me just shave inches off at a time. And then the other reason is this is only a 5-foot span, and then I'm also cutting it in half by another cross member here in the skid. Okay, so I'm done with the construction of the base, and here I'm just putting this stainless steel mesh over it and stapling it to it, and this is just to keep bugs out. And then as far as the walls and the roof go, I use traditional framing methods here. As you can see, I didn't do 16-inch centers on the studs. I went a little bit closer just because the walls are so small, and so I just halved it and then halved it again. Give me more things to attach to, and then of course I cut out jacks for the windows. I ended up adding a window to the other side. There's my door hole, and then I added just a 7-inch addition on one side for my slant, which I actually ended up moving to the other side later because I had a little bit of a design change last minute. All right, so I'm doing a single slant roof on this thing. I've got screws to hold me up. I got my buddy Mark Brown over here to help me get this set. Mark, you want to wave to the camera real quick? There he is. And then basically all I'm doing now is I'm just going to mark out where these little cutouts are. I'm going to use this as a pattern. You want to get that side? We're going to use this as a pattern, and we're going to cut out these notches so that I can sit directly onto these upper supports right here. Okay, now I'm putting the final pieces of these rafters up here. If you can see, I got the little notches cut out, and as you can see as well, I got my little rafter ties. They should go right where they're supposed to go and drop right in. Drop that one on there, set that on there, and then real quick, of course, we want to check these rafter tails to make sure everything's flat and level. All right, now I got Mr. Mark Brown holding this up for me. I got about a 5-inch overhang on the back. Should be about a 14-inch overhang on the front. And then I'm going to drill this in. Okay, coming to you. All right, about to put the sheathing on. I got my grabo here. Let's do it. I got to overhang all the way around. I got it. All right, so I got my Bosch router here with a flush trim bit, and I'm just going to trim off the excess. Okay, Emily's here with me, and we are about to do the roofing underlayment. So this bottom just peels off, and then we're going to lay this down on the roof, smush it down, and this is going to give me additional protection for my standing seam roof that I plan to put on here. It's pulling. You ready? Just pick up this side, flip it over, and then grab the other side. Okay. Huh? Oh. All right, we got this thing pretty much framed out. The next step is to put the siding on. I'm using this LP smart siding, and if you look there at the bottom, since I don't have anyone here to help me, and honestly this is probably easier, I'll just put a little board at the bottom where I want it to go. I'll set it on there, prop it up against where it's going, line it up on the edge, make sure that's all good, make sure that's all good, and then I'm going to shoot some screws in where it is going to be overlapped with either trim or by another piece of siding. I've got some weather resistant siding sealer on there, and that's going to be just what we need. Line these pieces up. They're supposed to go. Okay, now that we got all the siding on, we're going to put on the trim here. The biggest thing you want to worry about with these corner pieces is whatever piece isn't overlapping, which is the piece I'm putting on here, you want to rip down to about 3/4 of an inch smaller than the other piece so that the reveal is the same. Now that we've got all the siding and the trim on, it's time to paint. And this is where you're going to really see the project start to come together. Okay, so for the roof, we're doing a standing seam material, which is a 26 gauge metal. I have a trim piece right here. You can go to most any standing seam shop in your local area and order the panels to whatever width you want, and then you can get custom trim pieces made, like exactly what I did right here. I just got 4 of these made. I'm going to flash around all 4 sides of this. When they make them, they're going to make them in 10-foot sticks, and then you're going to have to cut them down with your saw. To cut this material, you're going to need a ferrous metal rated steel blade. You can cut it on your chop saw. A lot of people are going to tell you that it can't be done, but they are wrong. You just need to take some extra safety precautions. Take your time and get the right blade. Stick this on. My 2-inch side is going down because my 3-inch side is going on the roof, and then my 3-inch side is going to flash the top into the actual standing seam material on the other side. construction adhesive, and then we're going to use a self-tapper screw right here and our drill to drill it in the front. Okay, so we're working on the roof up here. We got our standing seam panels. I cut this one down after laying it out with a pair of snips. You can get those from the hardware store. And all I'm going to do is lay it down over my front flashing. You should put this piece down first, your front flashing, then put your panels on top of that so that you get a good little drip, and then put your other flashing on after that. So we're going to start putting these things on, and they just lock in together. These are a little bit long. This is exactly what I wanted. So I can have it hang off the front just a tad, just to give me a little bit more coverage there. We're just going to go straight into the roof through this little nail punch hole. And these are literally just going to snap right into place. I want to line that up before I snap it in. And I'm going to snap it. Bingo. All right, now that we got our standing seam panels on, we're finishing up the trim. Remember, we put the first piece of flashing on first, so the water would run off of that. And then we're putting these, whoops, on, golly, and we're putting these on the side. And what I did here was I got a piece of flashing under the standing seam. Then I have this around the side, and then I have a little corner piece under here to kind of bring it all home into one nice little family. Now we have the final piece of the puzzle here, our upper flashing. This is just going to sit right on top of our panels to make sure no water gets in where we don't want it. And then we match it up on the sides. Make sure the other side fits good as well. We'll screw that in. We'll be done. All right, so I got my floorboards milled up here. I used 6/4 alder. Here they are. I just planed them down, rounded the edges, got them nice and smooth. And then I created some 1/8" spacers out of some other scrap alder that I had to go in between the floors. Again, my floorboards are just going straight down to the joist so that sweat, moisture, water can go straight down to the ground. I use alder because, mainly just because I like the way it looks. I think it's going to contrast well against the cedar, and then also it's a little bit stronger than cedar, so it'll just give me a little bit more sturdy floor. So I've already got a few boards in here. It's going pretty well. Basically, I mean, it's pretty simple. All I'm doing is setting this in here, setting my gap on either side. And then I also want to be about an 1/8" off this wall. So I make sure that's nice and even. Give it a little kick, stand on it. And then if you can see, I've got some pre-drilled holes here. I'm just going straight through that into this additional beam that I added to hold my floors when I built the base. Okay, we got our final piece of the puzzle here for the floor. This is just, I made some cutouts to go around this trim. And we actually don't want this to be super tight. This is the second time I cut it. The first time it was really snug. But I want it to be a nice fit with the option of a little bit of expansion. So I'm keeping this gap back here the same. I have a tiny, tiny little gap on the sides right here. And I'm fitting nicely up against that trim. So that means that we can go ahead and drill our pilot holes. And start putting this thing together. I didn't video this, but I put the interior trim on for the door already in this video. And then after that, I'm just running a bead of silicone caulk in between the exterior trim and the interior door trim here, just to get a nice good seal. I did the same thing around the windows as well. Okay, so I got my windows in the other day and I didn't film this, but I wanted to kind of show you guys just how I did it. It's really quick and simple. I basically just made an exterior trim right here. It's going to come out the width of the thickness of the tongue and groove boards I'm going to put here. And then I stuck my window in there. There should be about a 16th to 1/8 inch gap all the way around. And then I just put these little decorative trim pieces in here. What I did on the outside was I put the outside one in first, and then I ran a bead of silicone caulk all the way around, mashed the window against there, and then I put the inside one in, and then just Brad nailed it in, and it's pretty sturdy. It's a great way to put a window in, something small like this especially, and then if ever anything ever happens, just use my multi-tool to cut these brad nails out, pop this trim out, and then I can replace that window with ease. Okay, so it's time for me to build a door for this thing. And I'm sure this is pretty close to square, but I'm also sure it's probably not perfectly square. And so instead of pulling measurements on all this, I'm just going to pull, or I have just pulled a piece of OSB up against this. I'm just going to draw a line around this using this with a gap, and then this as my pencil mark, and then that's going to be my cut line. That's going to give me a perfectly tight, snug fit as much as I want when I build my door. And if I ever want to cut it down a little bit, if it's too big, I can easily just cut it down with a track saw. All I did was tie a rope to this side, run back to a screw on that side, and if you get to tie knots, you get extra credit there because that will help you out a lot in the future. Now again, all I'm doing here is I'm going to use this guy as a spacer to help me draw a little 16th inch space around this door jamb. Take my time, and then I'm going to cut this out on my track saw. We'll cut on the outside of these lines, shim it up with our air shims, and press it through and see if we can get a good seal on here. Okay, I got this cut out based on my lines that I drew, and now we're just going to see if it fits, do a quick check on our work before we proceed. That's about, I would say, almost a perfect fit. I would be super happy with it if my door ended up like that. I got about an 1/8 inch on top. I'll need to cut off an additional 1/8 inch or so on the bottom, about an 1/8 inch on the right, and I'm super close on the left over here, about a 1/16 of an inch. So I could actually stand to lose a little bit of mass here, which is exactly what I want. Now I can take this door template when I build my door in the shop. I can either use this and transfer lines and cut that with my track saw, or I can simply lay this down on top of my door and use a flush trim bit all the way around it. Okay, so now we're at the point of putting insulation in the top of our ceiling here. First thing I want to do is grab some of these things. They're called tiger's teeth. I'm going to cut them to a specific length so they'll fit right up in here and bow up to hold the insulation in there. It's going to be probably about a 1/4 inch longer than whatever your gap is. It'll look something like this. Push it up, and it just has a nice little bow and stays in there. Grab a few of those, cut them to the right size, and get ready to place them in there after you cut your insulation. You see I got my little insulation cutting station over here. We're going to grab a piece of this nice thick rock wool insulation. This is better than fiberglass, especially for saunas, because it's thermal and moisture resistant. So it's going to really help you to keep that heat in and keep the moisture out. So I want to check in between my studs here. It's 9 3/4. So I'm going to cut these slats at 10 inches wide so I can shove that insulation up in there and it'll stick by itself. So I'll measure 10 on this side, make a little cut, and I'm just using a bread knife here. You can get an insulation knife, but this is going to work just as good. Make my little cut here. I have my level, line them up, make a mark, and the key to getting a good cut is having a sharp knife. You're just gonna want to cut it like it's bread. It's very similar consistency to bread. If you try to really saw into it, it's gonna tear it up. Just have a nice, easy sawing cut in multiple passes. And then once you're all the way through, one final pass. And then to do everything right, you should have a nice clean cut. This stuff can get pretty messy if you really try to start hacking away at it, and you want to avoid compressing it. You can take this piece that you just cut and shove it up in there. Now you don't want to just smash it in there. You want to compress it on the sides with your hands to get it started. Now if you cut this right, it should stay up in there on its own, but you still probably want to put a couple of those little tiger's teeth in there just to save you some potential headache in the future. So we got that up. Got a little gap right there. That's okay. I'll fill it in with some extra. Grab one of my tiger's teeth. Bam. That ain't going nowhere. Do a couple more. Perfect. And then that's it. We're gonna have a lot of little extra odds and ends pieces. And so when I'm done with all the main cuts, I'm gonna go back all those little pieces and shove it in spots like this, like this, like this, over here. All the little odd spots that aren't really a full cut, I'm gonna use those additional pieces to fill those up, just because all the heat from the sauna is gonna be trying to escape through the roof. Okay, the moment that I've been waiting for since I started building this thing, putting these little cedar tongue and groove panels on. I'm doing these about 4 or 5 at a time. And these are super simple, fun, satisfying way to go. So what I got was graded to the rough side, and then I just planed down the rough side so they're all a little bit thinner. So that actually leaves me more meat on the back for the tongue and the groove. I'm not really losing any strength, but it looks a lot better. So all I'm gonna do here is pop this up, pop it in, and if you're getting a lot of resistance, don't try to force it, because it probably means something is wrong. But if it's just a little bit like that, then I would say go for it. So push it up. You can see I got my studs marked here, and we're just gonna nail right through the tongue portion of this, so that when the other piece comes along, it'll cover that nail and you won't see any nail holes on this whole ceiling. So I'm just doing the ceiling today, but eventually it's gonna be the whole entire sauna. So I didn't video any of the electrical work, but you can see here it's pretty basic. Basically, I got a junction box there on the back side. That's the right side. I ran both wires all the way through. I got my 12 gauge wire as well as my 8 gauge wire for my sauna. I got a switch that's going to be on the outside of the sauna here. You don't want to have electrical switches on the inside because of the heat and moisture. And then that's pretty much it. So for the outside electrical, this is all I did. I got my 280 for my sauna going through this one, and I got my 110 for my lights going through this one. Junction boxes on the house and on the sauna. There's no disconnections in here. It just goes straight from the sauna all the way to my breaker. But these are nice because I have an input spot to my sauna that looks clean. And if I ever need to cut here, I can move this sauna to wherever it needs to go, and then have about a 4-foot pigtail of electrical out the back. I also use this flex hose, as you can see, and these watertight seals to go into the junctions on both sides. The connections on the inside of the sauna are almost the exact same. This time I have a metal junction box instead of the PVC like the outside. I just felt like that would withstand the heat better. But I have the same watertight connections on the junction box and on the heater itself, a 90 on the heater, and then the same flex hose going between the two to make sure no moisture gets in there and to protect the wires from heat. What's up, guys? Okay, so I didn't tape most of this, but the same way I did the ceiling, I did the rest of the sauna. Once I got all the wiring in and set how I wanted it to, I put my mineral wool insulation in here. Then I coated the whole thing with this moisture barrier / aluminum heat barrier, stapled it in, and then I marked all the studs. I also have written down on a piece of paper a little stud map from every wall, so that when I go back later, if I want to add anything in, I'll know exactly where the studs are at. Now I'm going to start putting these things on, and This is probably what I've been most excited about from the time that I started this project. And again, just like the ceiling, we're just putting our 18 gauge nailers in here. I see where my studs are, and I'm just shooting them right through. So I just got this door on. Now I could do a whole video about how to build a door and install a door. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on that for this particular sauna video. But I custom made this door. I used tempered glass, again, just like I did with the windows. This time I got it off Marketplace. It's 1/2 inch thick, which is kind of thick, but it's honestly great. It's just going to keep the heat in better. Putting a door on can be a huge pain in the butt, especially if it's not pre-hung like this one. So if you're going to take on this task, then I would recommend really reading up on it and seeing as much as you could learn. This particular door, I ended up having to cut down a little bit on the top and just a tiny bit on the sides to get my gap just right, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I am going to install a little ball latch here. It's just like a little spring-loaded metal ball, and it's going to clip into here on a little strike plate with a divot. And that's it for the door. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It's solid Western red cedar, just like the whole interior of the sauna. This is a great wood, and I used a product called Flood to coat this, as well as what I did with the outside of my windows over here. And then on a full Western red cedar wrap tongue and groove. The biggest thing that you want to watch out for when you're doing this is not all these are cut exactly the same or will stack exactly the same. And you really want to try to line these up the best you can. You can see here near the bottom, I got off a little bit and it got worse. It compounded near the bottom. Luckily, this is an area down here you can't see. I started from the top so that I could pull this line, and then worked my way all the way down. You can see that I got a healthy little gap right here, not too big, not too small, and around the windows, and the same thing around the door trim right here. You can't see it. But after I get all this other stuff going, the next step is going to be to place trim over that, and these are flush with this wall, so it'll just sit right on there. So I also got my upper bench seat built here. Even though this is a really small sauna, you still want to have 2 bench seats. The reason for this is because your upper bench is going to put you in the proverbial heat zone. So if you're too low, the sauna is just not going to get as hot as you want it to be. So I got my bench set at, once I put the slats on the top, it's going to be 33 inches high. I think that's going to be perfect. My lower bench is going to be 16 inches high. I'm going 22 this way, and obviously wall to wall. Now the way I built this, I started with a big truss here. I actually added a stud into the wall just for this truss, and it goes across, and then everything, this 2x6 sits on it, this 2x6 sits on it. This one doesn't sit on it, but it's also in the studs. And then I have one going across this way with another, like a T system under here. This is nice and flat, as you can see with my level. And so now I'm going to have 0.75 by 3 inch slats going from the back to the front all the way across. And I have some leftover tongue and groove that I'm going to put on the face of this thing. And this is going to be a nice, sturdy seat without being too close to the ceiling. What they say is you want to be 2 fist heights away from the ceiling. I'm about 3 on this side. I'm 2 on the other side because I got the nice little slant there. But after much deliberation, this is kind of how I decided I want to build the bench. I wanted it to be floating. I didn't want a middle post in the middle. And I really think it's 5'5". I think you could easily go up to 7, maybe even 8 feet floating with this design. The heater. So after a ton of deliberation, this is the heater that I ultimately ended up going with. Originally, I was looking at the Vevor heater. It's $200 on Amazon. That's super cheap. Seems to work well enough. The biggest problem I had with that was it's not electrically safety rated, and a lot of people were saying they had problems with the heating elements going bad. You know, that's kind of what you expect from a $200 heater. And I think it's a great choice if you want a super budget sauna and you're not worried about your sauna going up in flames. I am, because this thing is super nice and I don't want to see it on fire. So then my 2 other big options were either the Finnleo, which I went with, or the Harvia. Where the Finnleo stood out to me was it comes with a 5-year warranty. It's supposed to heat up way faster, and the electrical is much simpler. One thing that I didn't like about the Harvia and I was really nervous about was they got the electrical panel on the back, and you have to hook it up outside on the ground, then bring it in here, run your pigtail into a junction box on your wall, which really isn't that big of a deal, but kind of a pain in the ass. The thing that I love about the Finnleo is that obviously I'm still going to put a junction box here, but I'm just going to go straight through it. They have their own junction box in the heater. You just run this wire up through this hole right here, connect these, and then you pop this front plate back on, and that's it. You're done. Recommendation is to get a licensed electrician to come check your work, but it's pretty simple. I think they did a great job with this design, and they kind of made it idiot proof. I got this heater from a local guy over here in Greenville. His name's Joe. He runs Revive Sauna and Spa. Super knowledgeable about everything sauna related and heater related. Before I ever even bought anything from him, I talked to him on the phone for like 30 minutes. And so he kind of had me hooked right there just because that's the kind of customer service that I'm looking for. I know that if anything ever goes wrong, I have a direct line to him. He can help me out. He'll give me ideas or tips or whatever he needs to do to fix this thing, or get me in touch with Finnleo, and that's something that I don't mind paying a couple extra dollars for. In this video, you can see that I've already got the slats on the upper bench, and I've got the front faces on both of them, and I'm going to start putting the slats on the bottom bench here. It's a pretty tight squeeze, but I managed to get in there. I only got stuck a couple times, but I got out within a few minutes, so I was okay. You can see here that I'm using about a 1/4 inch piece of material to gap in between these slats, popping them on, and then I'm screwing them in through the bottom so that you can't see the screw holes through the top. Again, this is all solid Western red cedar for these, and then I use standard pine framing lumber to build the benches. Okay, so now I'm going to put in the soffit material. I'm using the same tongue and groove that I use on the inside, but I covered the outside in this flood stuff, the same thing that I put on the door. One big mistake that I made was I should have waited until after I put this on to put this top piece trim on. Because I didn't, I had to do like a bunch of mental gymnastics that I didn't want to do to get a super snug fit, and I have to put this up in one piece because there's no way that I'll get that tongue and groove material around there and super snug up. This is going to be a one shot, one kill thing. I'm not doing a practice take on this to make sure it fits, because if it fits and I don't film it, I'm not taking it back down to get filmed. Take two. Here we go. Hopefully it fits. Let's see if we can get this side in. So one thing that you need for a sauna to work really well is convection. You want air circulation, cold air coming in, hot air going out, so that heater can keep pumping out air and operating smoothly. How we achieve that is an in vent. My heater's right here in my sauna, and you want your out vent to be under the bench seat on the opposite side. So the air is going to flow in there through the heater up and around, under the vent, and out the back, creating convection, getting a lot more sustainable, good heat, helping the life of our heater, and keeping fresh air in here without having a ton of condensation build up. So what we have is a dryer vent, a little extender, a hole saw, and I have this thing that's actually missing the knob here. Not a huge deal. I'll just put a new knob on there, but this is going to slide and close and open my out vent. If I want to close it off and get super hot, I can. If I want to get a little more airflow, I'll open it up. Okay. Okay. I think we got a hole all the way through. Go to the back side. Okay, we got our nice little hole cut out here. Check it real quick. Nice snug fit. Before I screw it in, I'm going to add some silicone around the edges just for extra protection from the elements. And if you're doing this, you always want to keep it open on the bottom. In case anything does get in, you don't want to trap it and create mold. Okay, now as promised, I'm gonna do a full price breakdown on this thing. But before I do, there's a few things to keep in mind. In this breakdown, I'm not including the price of the heater. The reason for that is because heaters can go anywhere from $200 up into the thousands. And you typically can't buy heaters directly from the manufacturer. So this price is really gonna be contingent on what heater you want and where you're located. As I mentioned before, I went with the Finnleo Designer B 6 kilowatt wall mounted heater for this space. It comes with a 5-year warranty, it looks nice, and it's just a great overall heater. Second thing to remember is I made my own door. Typically this door is going to run you somewhere around $1,500 to $2,000 because I build furniture and I have all the tools to make a nice door. I just did it myself. So the only cost you're going to see there is in the material, which brings me to the third thing. All the glass I got off Marketplace. So if you were to buy custom cut tempered glass for all this stuff, it would be somewhere around $300. I paid, I think, $60 or $70 for all 3 pieces of glass, the 2 windows and the door right here. Lastly, it's important to remember that I do build custom furniture. So it means I can buy wood that's a little rough or the wrong size and then modify it into what I need it to be. But also I have a lot of connections in the lumber industry, so I was able to get some pretty good deals on a lot of this wood. You may not be able to match those prices. Okay, now for what I would have done differently. My biggest mistake and what I would have done and should have done differently is this door is supposed to be on the high side. Originally, the slant was going this way. I switched the slant, but I didn't turn around this framing wall to move this door to the other side. Because of this, I got really tight in the trim through here, and there's about an 1/8 inch gap up here where it doesn't hit this. And if it did, I would have had to shave it down, and that would have been super annoying. The second thing that I would have done differently is I would have moved this window about 6 inches this way. I like the location of it for the purpose of seeing out of it while I'm sitting here and seeing what's going on. But I really like to sit with my back against this wall right here and my shoulder digs into the window, which is kind of annoying. This is a very small detail, but if I could change it, that's what I would do. And the last thing that I would have done differently, again, small change here, I would have made the footprint about 2 inches bigger this way and this way. The reason that I made it this size was because I got 10-foot tongue and groove cedar boards. So spanning this wall and this wall gave me about 4 to 5 inches of leftover material for each cut. I would have liked to get that extra 3 or 4 inches of material in this length just because it wouldn't have really cost me anything extra and I'd have a little bit longer sauna. Probably the most controversial thing I did here that's outside of typical building methods, but I really think it works better for an outdoor sauna, is I don't have any subfloor in here. So these flooring boards, which are 6/4 alder, attach directly to the floor joist. The reason I did this is because I'm going to be sweating a lot in here, and the sweat can just drip through these 16th-inch cracks in between my floorboard directly down to the bottom. A very minimal amount will be getting on the joist, and even if it does, the joists are pressure treated. Another thing I did that's a little bit outside of the traditional building method is I use 2x4s for the floor joists and for the ceiling joists. I know that typically you're supposed to use 2x6, but in a space this small, I genuinely think that it doesn't matter. And that saved me 3 inches of height that I could then add to the inside of my sauna. I needed this to be at a certain height because there's a window on my house that I want that to be under once I move this back against my house. And if you think you might need or just want a little bit more instruction on this build, I've got a full downloadable plan set on my website. I'll drop the link in the description. All right, that's all I got for you guys on the sauna build. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. If you got any questions at all, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them.